It's again recruiting season, of course, across the nation and at Florida State. Lock it in, folks, with us for the next 60 right here at the Voice of College Football, FSU Live. You know who that guy is. Georgitis, the Renegade Report. I got to think, it blows my mind if anybody's watching us right now, which is only just a couple people right this second, but we'll be a whole lot more here in about 10 minutes and a couple thousand by the time we post this video for a few days. If you are not subscribed to the Renegade Report, it is free, right, George?
Yeah, absolutely. 100% free.
Yep.
We have memberships if you want to
Sure.
donate, super chats, all that stuff. But yeah, it's just at the Renegade Report. You can find us. We got all kind of fun stuff. We talked to former players. We just added a new co-host. So yeah, come see us. Totally free.
Awesome. Well, recruiting is on the minds of everyone who follows college football right this second. Camps all over the place. Every show that I do, camps, official visits, all sorts of projected leans and targets and where's this guy going and so forth and so on. I know there's a big visit coming up here by Ohio State, the committed linebacker Tarvis Alford. So if you want to take off on that and anybody else that comes to mind, and what is the current news and what's expected here in the next few days and over the weekend?
Did you look at my notes or something? Because like we didn't even talk about this part of it, and you like literally read my first lines. I was gonna mess with you because Tarvis Alford, of course, committed to Ohio State, one of the top linebackers in the entire nation. I would sure love to get him at Florida State, but it's that's one of those ones big to get him on campus. So we'll see where it goes from there. Not a ton, but yeah, that's as far as the names that have been on campus the past couple of days. That one is way high up on there. Somebody that I've been really high on, and we'll see how the season plays out. I would love to get him in. Personally, I'm not so sure. I feel really, really good about Pritchard. We're gonna see. We're gonna see on offer. I wish I had more. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and tell you that the flip's coming or anything like that. But yeah, just getting him on campus is big. Another guy who was on campus recently, he's already committed to Florida State. JV Hilson showed up back in town. He was back on campus today, and he's a defensive end, literally the number one defensive end in the entire nation. One of the first commits for Florida State in this class. So really big to see him be here for a weekend and then show right back up a couple days later, show up on campus. So JV Hilson keeps on showing up. That's a big deal. And every visit you can kind of prevent him from making, and that's or every time you get him to Florida State, that's one place he's not, and vice versa. So I love seeing JV Hilson on campus. As far as today, it wasn't very big. There was a kid, Ben Hanks, junior DB out of Pensacola, Booker T. Washington High School, in my stomping grounds, came up. I believe he's got an official visit on the 18th, which would be, is that this weekend or next weekend? Maybe. I believe he'll be here next Tuesday for an official visit, something like that. But he's got an official visit coming up. He's a rising player, so look out for him on Florida State's board there. Todd Robinson is a guy that went to UGA, as we talk about kind of Tarvis Alford and wanting to flip him. That's been one of the things that's happened the last couple of days. Todd Robinson is a guy we kind of snuck up on. Nope, he goes to UGA. So his visit is canceled. Zyar Addison committed to Oregon, another official visit that was canceled. Another guy, Derek Cooper, popped up, out of nowhere. Tight end athlete, and Florida State was really, really high on him. All of a sudden, he took a visit to Georgia, and same thing. Committed to Georgia, that thing shut down. That was the report. And then a couple days later, you see it pop up. He says, "No, I was not committed. I'm not committed to anybody." So Derek Cooper is another one. I call it the fake UGA commit, but he is still on the board. But yeah, there are a ton, not a ton of people today. I believe we had about 40 different high schools of guys coming in. But for these individual camps and stuff, it's a lot more kind of for the kids than Florida State. You really have to kind of zero in on the very top guys. Last year, boy, they had a giant camp, a super camp with all kind of different top kids and stuff at the beginning of the month. They didn't opt to do that this year, doing a lot of these smaller satellite camps, individual camps, and things of that nature. So the big weekend, like we've been telling you guys over and over again, that's June 21st through June 23rd. But there has been quite a bit we can get into just, as far as different targets and things like that. I'm not sure if there's anything you saw that caught your eye, Mark.
Well, just to extend on the Alford situation, I don't want to give Florida State fans any false hope, but I will say this because I don't know any particulars about his situation other than you can check out our conversation on the Ohio State channel earlier today. Buckeyes Live, an hour there. Those guys obviously dove into that to a certain extent. Here's the deal, though. The history tells us that while Ohio State is extremely successful, you got to say that I don't think there's any question, they're the most successful team in the country outside of the South to go to Florida and get top line players. They also lose a lot of those players that originally commit because they're so far away and it's tough to keep them for a long, we're talking about, what are we looking at? Another 6 months that they've got to hold on to him. So they have lost a lot of those guys too.
Yeah, hey, that's a very good point. The kid's out of Vero Beach, 6'2", 210. Like, he is that guy. He's kind of perfect. It'd be a guy that Randy Shannon would love to bring in. It's kind of a great linebacker class for Randy Shannon. There's several elite guys that like really fit his mold. But yeah, I just worry, I know we've got some history at Vero Beach. We've had a relationship for him a long time, but he's got everybody in the book after him. We'll see. I'm just currently, I haven't heard anything to get me seriously believing that we've got a shot there. I could be totally wrong. But yeah, that's where I'm at on him. But you hit on a good point. They may leave. Anytime a Florida kid goes out of state anywhere, whether it's Ohio State or USC or whatever the case may be, these relationships, getting him to continue and come in, that could pay dividends, whether we get to flip him or whether he hits the portal in 2026 or, whatever the case may be. And that's something that this staff has had a lot of success with, maybe not from Ohio State. I don't know how many players we've taken from up there, but definitely in general.
And again, everyone, I don't have any intel regarding Tarvis Alford, but I'm just speaking in generalities. And I also think that there's a component there that, a place like Ohio State comes in, hits him over the head, bam, let's go there, develop NFL players like crazy, all the good things going on there. But after 6 months and on and on and on, and I like it at home, and why would I want to leave home? And that's a long ways away. And I think that comes into play. So if everything else matches up and Mike Norvell and his staff can make a good play, there you go. It could happen.
Very, very well said, my friend. Very well.
We appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate George being here because if George isn't here, we don't have a show. So we thank George for being here from the Renegade Report. And folks, again, subscribe to the Renegade Report. Chris is typically here. James is typically here. We thank them so much for everything that they do for us here at the Voice of College Football because you put the four of us together. I think we've got a unique show because these guys they know Florida State football up and down like nobody that I know. And then I poke at them a little bit here and there from a national perspective. And it works well.
We got to have some fun.
Yeah, why don't we just go off the rails here and we might as well hit it right now. Something that got to you, and I totally got it. And actually, George, and we'll put up the image here in just a second. When you brought this to my attention, I got to admit, my response, which was clueless to you, I knew exactly what you were talking about. I just wanted to see what you were going to say when I said, "What's the deal? What's the issue?"
Poking the bear. What's wrong with this picture?
What is wrong with this picture? So we're going to veer off here to the College World Series, and of course, Florida State is one of the 8. And if you've looked at the field, because we talk a lot of conference, pride and rivalries, 8 teams, 4 from the SEC, 4 from the ACC in the College World Series, and of course, Florida State's there. And George pointed out to me I believe this is the official.
It's NCAA D1 baseball. I'm pretty sure was the account, not like a magazine or anything like that. It was literally NCAA.
So we will find this here in just a second. Chris is in some traffic right now, so we're awaiting Chris. Hopefully he can make it, but that may not happen. So I just got that message from him, but we'll pull it up here. Here we go. And so this is the official, where they're promoting the event. They want to highlight the teams and the star players and that sort of thing. You've seen these kind of deals a million times, but this is what the 2024 College World Series promotion looks like from Omaha. and the NCAA. And you just, folks, just kind of take that in and see if there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, so this right here is just a microcosm of what we preach. People say, oh, y'all are just sensitive conspiracy theorists. You're always looking for this. You're always looking for that. No, guys, we've talked about it all. We've talked about the ACC. They got to pay the most back. We got snubbed from the playoff. There's all these things that happens. You know, if a SEC team happens to be number 11, they add a number 11 to the top 11. So going into this tournament, it was pretty controversial. 11 SEC teams get in. Now 8 ACC teams get in, so it's only 3 more, but still, it's wild, vastly more than everybody else. And if you ask me, ACC extremely competitive, but the RPIs of the ACC versus the RPIs of the SEC, nowhere close. And again, just like in football, it's all circular reasoning. Well, they're playing all these tough SEC teams. Okay, I'm not going to go down that path. We don't have to get too deep into it. Let's just get into what happened. 11 SEC teams got in, 8 ACC teams got in. Well, at least 4 of the SEC teams that got in have been eliminated by ACC teams, either in the regional or the super regional, to a point where, like our amazing host said, 4 ACC teams, 4 SEC teams. Okay, and pretty spectacular fashion that Florida State did it. You know, sweeping games, not losing. I haven't lost a game in a long time. Good story for Florida, all that stuff. But long story short, 4-4. And when you look at this thing, I mean, I'm just looking at it. I'm pretty far away. It's pretty, but I can see Texas A&M, I can see Texas, and I can see Kentucky. That's all I can see at first blush. Then I zoom in a little bit. Oh, there's Florida. You know, there goes my lights. There's Florida. You can't see, you know, their logo or anything, but they're still giant. They're still right up there up top. And over in the top right corner, a little bit smaller than the SEC guys, but still decent size. You see NC State there. But I challenge anybody without pulling out a magnifying glass to be able to find their logo or recognize them.
I had to blow it up.
Literally, you have to blow it up. That can't be like NC State has to have a picture with the wolf, something better. But anyways, getting down to the last 3 ACC teams and the ire, the pissed me off, and I posted it. Nobody cared about it. Nobody really caught this but me, so that's why I wanted it. It was just on my mind. I had to talk about it. You can see there in the bottom left, there's FSU. If you really pull out your microscope, you can tell that's them. You can't make out a logo. You can't make out Seminoles, anything like that. But, you know, only colorway close to that, that's Florida State. And to their right, UNC, you know, single-digit losses on the entire year, including the tournament. They're in white and blue. They're even worse than FSU. You can't even make out, I think, a single letter of Tar Heels. The guy's helmet's off or his hat's off. You can't see nothing, literally nothing. And then Virginia's over there. Luckily, his bat is just over to where if you pull out the magnifying glass, you can see Virginia. And this may not be nothing to anybody. It may be just a damn poster. But this is from the NCAA itself. And it just goes to show why Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, anybody that is serious about sports, you know, it goes past football. It's time to get out. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, I sent this to one of my SEC friends because I was like, figured surely he could laugh and get a joke out of it. No, he just, that's the teams. That's that. Da, da, da. And look, okay. If your argument was, okay, the top 3 seeds were SEC teams, the first 3 seeds of the national seeds. Okay. So that means Kentucky, Tennessee, A&M, they need to be big. What the hell is Florida doing up there? Florida was a 3 in the regional. They weren't a 3 as a national seed. No, they were a 3 in their regional. I believe they were either 28 and 27 or, you know, something like that, 20-28, a 500 ball club. Okay, they get an opportunity. They knock out Clemson in the super regional. So that validates everybody. Oh, well, they obviously deserve to be there since they won. That's another argument that drives me nuts. No, they just got lucky. I mean, 4 SEC teams have been put out, literally 4 by ACC teams that you see on the screen. So yeah, it left me heated. It's like, I wish Chris was here to say, he might laugh at me and say it's stupid, but yeah, that was my feelings on it. Just a microcosm of everything that's going on. And the ACC is and will continue to be the whipping boy because they allow stuff like this to happen. If this was the SEC down at the bottom, they've even got like overlays, like the shiny graphic, like literally covering up the FSU in North Carolina. It's not even clear. So if I didn't make thumbnails, if I didn't do this kind of for a living, if I didn't do this every day, 7 days a week, I could understand maybe he just didn't think about it. Maybe this is just the way it fit together. But no, anybody that's ever made one of these, you have everybody's feelings in your mind. You're thinking, oh, well, I've got this guest, on. I can't make myself huge and then little. All these things, this just goes into graphic design. This was the ACC. Let's hide them and let's show the SEC. And it doesn't make any sense. When you look at Florida State as a baseball team, maybe you can argue Virginia and NC State, North Carolina. Florida State does numbers. Baseball, football, it don't matter. They were number 8 national seed, I guess their lowest one. But no, Florida wasn't a national seed. So that's my rant on that.
And what you just pointed out, George, is a great point, because I am no marketing guy. But at the same time, yes, I will say that we're not talking about, we grabbed some guy that threw together a thumbnail on a YouTube channel, because I've done some things where somebody got bent out of shape over some perception of a title or a thumbnail. And then I looked at it and I thought, okay, well, I'm not a professional. It didn't cross my mind. Yeah, one guy's bigger than the other guy, that sort of thing. Do you know how much money is spent and how much scrutiny is put into something like this that is going to be all over social media, the internet, on television, and so forth and so on? This had to pass the eyes of so many people. I'm assuming every school that's involved and the conferences had to sign off on that and give that a look. And that was just okay with the ACC. So that's it. Yeah, it is a bit ridiculous when you put it in those terms as well. And again, let's understand that, yeah, these networks are trying to make money, but this is not a situation where, so college baseball is a very regional sport, and this is the one time a year where it becomes basically a national sport. There are going to be people watching the College World Series, because they do every year, that, of course, they like baseball, but they probably watch Major League Baseball. Shoot, the Major League Baseball announcing teams do a lot of College World Series games and get involved and so forth, as we see with the Little League World Series that's become so popular in August. So my point here is that there's not a Caitlin Clark up there that you want to say, okay, put her 8 times larger than the LSU player because that's why people are watching. Nobody knows who these guys are. The brands are the teams. These guys might become more popular after they hit 3 home runs in a College World Series, but as it stands right now, nobody knows who these guys are outside of their fan bases. So it's all about the brands. So the brands should be represented in an equal way.
Facts. I couldn't have said it better myself. You took the emotion out of it and really said it in a beautiful way, and I couldn't agree more. It's just ridiculous, and we'll see what happens. You mentioned that it's bigger in the Southeast. It's really a regional sport, and it's true. And this has kind of been the argument I've always had on conference superiority and the things of that nature. And the SEC, it just means more. Look, there's part of that's right. The Southeast, it just means more. Okay, and that's why the ACC is second in national championships. They're right there, second or third, when you talk about draft picks and those things that I've mentioned on here. It's because they've got teams in the Southeast. And when you look at that photo, what is it? It's 8 teams in the Southeast. Regardless of what freaking conference they're in, you've got the representative for the state of North Carolina, 2 of them. You've got Florida State, and you've got Virginia, another Southern team. And then whatever it is, I don't know what makes Kentucky something special that they need to be up there of being in the SEC over a Florida State or a UNC. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And Chris jumps in with a comment saying the university doesn't get a say, which I was wondering about that, but the conference definitely does. And this is why I expect nothing different. So yeah, I'm right with there on Chris on that one for sure.
Thank you, Chris. I misspoke, but I certainly knew that the conference would have had to have seen that before that would continue. I was around ESPN for 19 years, and certainly we had things called that they still air institutionals. And you talk about how important it was to represent these conferences in these schools properly. At ESPN, when we were broadcasting whatever the collegiate sport, you could drop, let's say, the previous game went to 4 overtimes and, we didn't get to the second game of the doubleheader, let's say a college basketball game until halftime or whatever, or into the second half, that sort of thing. you had to air the institutionals for those schools and those conferences above. If you had to drop the highest priced ad in that game, it had to go, because you had to properly represent the schools and the conferences for every college event.
Facts. I mean, it's just common sense. It's like you can argue which one's more profitable, which one's more sellable, but it's like everybody fought to get there. There's literally half and half representation. And if you're going to argue who did better in the tournament, it's hands down the ACC. The ACC has dominated the SEC in this tournament. Hands down, period, into the story. 11, 8. Okay. 4. I'm not a mathematician here, but that's solid, pretty close to 50% for the ACC, somewhere around 30 something, for the SEC. It's like, well, we had 4, 5, 6 guys eliminated in the first round, but Florida made it through. So that shows just how good Florida is.
Yeah, and even if
are you hearing me good or?
Yeah, you cut out there for about 5 seconds. But even if we were going from a historic standpoint, like saying, okay, let's say this was the NCAA men's basketball tournament, and the Final Four was North Carolina, Kentucky, and then like Fresno State and Utah or something, and they wanted to put boom, North Carolina, Kentucky, boom, because they're the big brands. Kentucky in baseball, they've never gone to a College World Series. They have been completely off the radar. Florida State is a great baseball brand for 40, 50 plus years in college baseball and have been to many College World Series. So that's not even an angle to it.
Facts. You're preaching, man. I agree 100%. It's like, and we talk about the same thing with football. You look at the numbers. It's like, no matter how black and white the numbers are, people will still argue. But yeah, we don't have to stay on it all day. But I appreciate you for indulging me, because that was just a major microcosm. And you see why we have a court date coming up in Leon County on June 18th. And we have a Board of Trustees meeting coming up on June 20th. And we're getting the hell out of here. Another date to look for, June 30th, which is the date that the ACC has set. That's how long we have for the thing to crumble. You would need 7 or 8 teams to step up by June 30th, which is looking less and less likely as we move forward. But there is that court date on the 18th, and there is that Board of Trustees meeting set on the 20th. So we will definitely have our ears and eyes open and ready to see what the next piece of news that does come out of that situation is, because get us out of here. It's got to stop. The disrespect and it affects you on the field. I know what we just talked about doesn't affect us on the field. But again, it's just a microcosm of the disrespect or lack of respect, whatever you want to call it, that goes on. At the beginning of this thing, I'm thinking I'm proud of ESPN. We were on ESPN1 in the super regional the whole way through. It's like, it seemed like, okay, we're on even footing with everybody. And then I just seen this. I know it doesn't have anything to do with ESPN. It's NCAA graphic, but still, it just set me off. It's like, no matter what we do. So please, Florida State, kick Tennessee's butt. I would really love to see us throw down the #1 national seed and just really kick their butt.
We've got the Miami show next, of course, as usual, but we've got a deep dive on the ACC, and that's coming up at approximately 8:15, 8:30, and that's going to be here on the Florida State channel, the Miami channel, the Clemson channel. What that is we've got our buddy Tony Altamore coming on, and what Tony's going to do is basically he runs through the metrics. The guy's a mastermind when it comes to not just running a bunch of numbers. His historical knowledge of institutions and academics and partnerships and all of that involving all of this. And so I asked Tony, I said, with so much going on with Clemson and Florida State at the forefront, because they're actually in court, but obviously Miami's going to go somewhere, and North Carolina's now squawking, and they're making their bid to especially focus on those 4. It seems like Virginia seems to be next in line in regards to being an attractive destination somewhere. So let's look at these schools, look at what they have to bring to the table: football, athletically, academics, culture, media, etc. So Tony's digging through his charts, and he set everything up. So we're going to go live about 8:15 or 8:30 with that. So please join us. You can join us right here. George, I didn't want to throw something at you, but this seems to be related to what you just ran down. And again, I just pulled this up but the headline reads, and this is coming from Sportskeeda, 12 ACC teams approve lawsuit against Florida State amid rumors of Seminoles joining Big Ten expansion in latest
I
conference
swear you're reading
realignment
my mind, bro.
wave.
I was sitting here thinking, because that happened, I believe, on Friday, and I was literally thinking, I guess we could bring that up. I'm not sure if he's talked about it yet, but yeah, Matt Baker with the Tampa Bay Times, one of the guys who's really been doing a good job of tracking down these legal documents and things like that. Him amongst some other people for months, ever since that meeting happened to vote. It was the vote to sue Florida State. That's what it's talking about. But ever since that happened, he has been searching doggedly, putting in FOIA requests in all the different states and everywhere else, trying to figure out the minutes for that meeting, find out what was said, who was there, who said what. And he's finally gotten the answer to that. We finally got for sure who the third team was to vote against suing Florida State. And I kind of misspoke, so I'll start from the beginning. Clemson, they did not attend. They refused. They were asked. They didn't vote. Florida State, it obviously wasn't there. UNC, that would be the third school. They showed up and they did, in fact, vote Florida State, if I'm saying this right. But yeah, there were three teams that were against, suing Florida State, which is Florida State, North Carolina, and Clemson. All the rest of the ACC, we know for sure the other 12 teams were for it. And with the 15 team number listed in there, that tells me that Notre Dame as well, got to vote in that, got to vote to sue Florida State. So pretty pathetic stuff, but we all kind of knew. We talked about it quite a bit with UNC being vocal, certain members of their board of trustees and things like that, and the rumors about them being the next school to possibly come out. It makes perfect sense. That was UNC, but you saw rumors, you saw different schools, maybe some fans or people at Miami or NC State would be like, trying to pretend like, oh, you don't know which way we voted, this and that, but no, we know for sure it was UNC, Clemson, that were on Florida State's side, which, holds up to everything we've seen. And we know for a fact on the flip side of that, we know Miami voted to sue Florida State. We know NC State voted to sue Florida State. Pretty much everybody but those three teams. It's just a shame. It is what it is, but it's all out in the open now. And that's another reason, another thing that tells you it's going to be pretty tough to get 7-8 teams on board by June 30th. Because it really looks like if it had been another team plus UNC starting to, change their stance and be vocal, that would give me hope. That put us at 4 teams. And then you have a Miami who they say if everybody moves, they'll jump, but they're just not going to risk it on their own. That's what you hear. I don't believe that for a second. I think they're just going to be best friends, ride the ship down to the end. But no, that's about the extent of it as far as that goes.
Yeah. So obviously Clemson and Florida State, they have put their money and their legal reputation, everything where their mouth is. North Carolina has been vocal enough that they've made it obvious what their intent is. So you're thinking whether Miami, this vote is not a great indicator, but they're trying to weigh their future and their best options and see if this league can hold together. So if those three jump, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, which almost seems obvious, especially for the two. North Carolina's not made any moves. They would really have to backpedal in terms of their PR to get back on board with the ACC. But man, I just don't know how this league would be able to compete and be considered a power conference. I know it's got enough teams. It's got just a bunch of collection of teams.
I agree.
The Big 12 kind of did the same thing, but they were able to do it much more effectively with Utah and getting some brands that are a little bit more viable to stay relevant and kind of stay safe. I've said this many times, and Big 12 fans hate me for it, but it's the truth. The Big 12 protected itself by its own mediocrity. Basically, they collected schools that nobody else wanted, and so they did a great job. They saved their league. They did what they had to do, but nobody wanted those teams, so they kind of protected themselves. The ACC was hurt by being top-heavy with like 3 or 4 really great brands that are better than anything in the Big 12, and so they're going to say, screw this. We're worth more than this. We're gone. And people want us. 2 leagues want us. So that has been the demise and will be the demise of the ACC.
Facts. And I got to battle my ADHD here because there's so many different directions I can go with this. But no, you're 100% right. It's what I've said since the beginning. I think we're going to a Power 2 and a relegation league, whatever you want to call it. There's several options out there, but I think there's zero option that ends up with a Florida State and a Clemson leaving the ACC and then remaining as some kind of our conference. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. I saw some people talking about which is stronger, the top 6 of the ACC or the top 6 of the Big 12. And you can look at it like, yeah, okay, when you start looking at the Kansas States and somebody versus the NC States and stuff like that, Utah is a nice squad. Really, Utah you could put up against anybody, but FSU is Clemson. They've been really competitive. When you look at the wins in the playoff era, I think they've got over 100 wins. They've been 8, 9, 10 wins every year since 2000, whatever. So, yeah, I really like Utah, but you hit the nail on the head. There's a ceiling that Florida State and Clemson have. Miami used to have. It's just different. So that's the separator there between all of the Big 12 and the ACC. I agree with you 100%. Once FSU and Clemson leave, Big 12 and the ACC are going to have to either get together and form like this just awesome relegation league that is just absolutely the third best thing out there, or one's just going to have to die and swallow the other. They've got a lot of differences, but they've also got a lot of similarities just kind of in different ways. They kind of treated Texas and Oklahoma like the ACC, I feel like, has treated us. But it's like almost like they knew they didn't have them locked in. They knew where they were going to leave. They're just kind of like, screw it, we've got our other plan moving forward. And as you said, yeah, they did a pretty good job getting Utah, UCF, some of these different schools that came over. But I think that the biggest thing, the biggest difference is those legitimate championship contender teams at the top of the SEC, at the top of the Big Ten. That's what makes the difference. That's what put the Big Ten, the Big Ten, before they made all these changes, it was Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Those were your 3 title contenders. That's what carried it. And yeah, that's a problem. Big 12 lost both of theirs, and as soon as ACC loses both of theirs, they're going to be in the same boat. They had a chance. They could have talked. The Big 12 and the ACC could have got together and said, let's figure out a way to merge, keep the good teams, keep Oklahoma. Imagine Oklahoma, Texas, FSU, Clemson, etc. That could have worked, and that could have been something that could have competed against the SEC and the Big Ten. But they were both, whatever, resting on their laurels, whatever the case may be, they decided not to do it. The Pac-12, I don't really know anything about California enough in this. The Pac-12, exploded. I haven't been doing much research on that, but same thing with them. They had all these opportunities to do things. They lost their whole conference. To the Big 12's credit, they saw that happen and they moved. Like, they really tried to improve their conference. The ACC saw it and just figured, how can we finagle? How can we call on FSU into being here? How do we make sure we have this many teams that they leave to get that ESPN money? But I agree 100%. Ultimately, it just comes down to the kind of 2 teams at the top. If you don't have one of those guys, which Utah could become that guy, they're the closest out of anybody to have a chance. But outside of that, it's just, you can argue top 40 teams, and that's great. But that's been the ACC's problem. ESPN, the committee, nobody cares if you're actually a top 40 program. You got to have a national title intentions, or either be in a conference heavy with those guys to get the quote unquote perception.
This is not the time or place for it, but I think you saw something that I posted about a week ago, because there was a story at ESPN, I believe, that outlined the revenue share of all the conferences this past year. And it would surprise a lot of people. The Pac-12 made like $100 million plus more than the Big 12. They were just mismanaged. They completely were blindsided, did not read the tea leaves, didn't understand what was going on. They could have scarfed up the few quality valued members of the Big 12. This could have happened completely in reverse, but they botched that. But this is not a time for that. But it goes to show you, number one, that the ACC is in a tough spot financially, because those numbers, that this is before the new deal kicks in for the Big Ten and the SEC. the Big Ten in particular. This is before that, and it's still just not even comparable. The other thing that I think you're making a distinction on that people have to realize when we get into these conversations about, and people are aligned to their teams and they get offended when you basically put their team in a certain category to say
Right.
they're just not a TV draw. You love your team. We appreciate that. I love Purdue fans, Kansas State fans, Stanford fans. I love you. I love when somebody calls me and they're like, I'm a Wake Forest fan. That's awesome. That is awesome that you can love college football and watch Wake Forest every year. I think that's phenomenal. That's awesome. I get sick of talking to Georgia and Ohio State fans every day. But facts are facts. And you got to make a distinction as well. There's a connection, obviously, between winning and how popular the brand is and the money, but it's not always lined up. You know, if we were sitting here 5 years ago and we were talking about Texas, we'd be talking about they haven't done anything on the football field for 10 years, but they're still Texas and they still make a ton of money and they're a brand. So there's a difference there because a lot of Big 12 people, they get offended because they'll be like, well, Kansas State's a really good team and they're really good. Absolutely. They are doing a great job there. They're doing a great job. They don't draw big numbers on television, and that's what matters. There's a distinction there. How well you're doing in the field versus how popular your brand is and how much value you bring to TV networks.
And as aggravated I get as people that harp on high school recruiting and you got to do it a certain way. There is no certain way to do it in this day and age, but there is a level of talent you're going to need to survive a playoff or just be at that extra top level that just, you know, Kansas, regardless of how good their coach is, it's going to be tough. It's just going to be tough to get those guys out there. So we'll see. And Oklahoma and Texas, like you mentioned, even when Texas wasn't great, they've always had the ability to bring in those guys. They've always had the ability to bring those top level guys in. So we'll see how it goes down. I just want my team to get paid. And just before we move on, like we talked about, you know, what happened to the Pac-12, what the Big 12 did, what the ACC is currently doing. These guys, both the Big 12 and the ACC, when Oklahoma and Texas, when Florida State and Clemson are going to you and you're saying, like, look, we got to do unequal revenue sharing. We've got to do this. We've got to do that because the numbers are going up like crazy. They could have went in their damn pockets to figure something out. They could have took a hit and paid Florida State and Clemson $60 million this year. However they had to do it without pissing off the rest of the league or whatever the case may be, if they had to do this or do that, whether it's take a chunk, find $100 million here out of our pocket that we're going to distribute, and this is how we're going to distribute it. It's outside of the contract, but we're going to, you know, fill the gap. If they would have done anything like that, maybe the teams want to work with you and get there. But when it's just, you know, piss on you, piss on you, piss on you, piss on you, pissing on you, and telling you it's raining, like, there's just only so much you can take, and it is what it is. We're at that point. Time to get the heck out of there, and no more of these posters with FSU down in the dirt.
Well, let's understand this. To play off of your last and latest point, let's say everybody for round numbers sake, everybody in the ACC is pulling in $40 million in football. If the ACC, knowing the situation that they're in, and I'm not talking about 3 months ago, I'm talking about like 2-3 years ago, know what's coming down the pike with, the Big 10 signing this deal and the SEC is getting what and again, this was already a huge gap before these deals kicked in. If they would have gone when you made the comment about pissing off the rest of the league, I thought, yeah, you don't want to piss off your partners and you want everyone to feel it part of the league, but you just face it and say, you know what? Okay, everybody gets 40 million right now. If you take 5-8 million, I don't know what that number is. I'm not an accountant, but we'll take round figures, 5 or 8 million away from Wake Forest, away from Syracuse, Boston College. We know the schools.
Who's not going to spend it, by the way? They don't.
Yeah, they're not going to spend it. And the 32 million that they're going to make is still anything better. They still want to be in the ACC and collect that check because they're never going to be able to do that again and give that to Clemson and Florida State and whatever, you know, lesser amount to Miami and North Carolina, whoever. But obviously those top two brands, they may have been able to avoid this because you collect 8 million from 7 or 8 schools and suddenly you got 60 million in your pocket and you can bump up 30 million or 25 and then maybe another 5 or 8 to a Miami or a North Carolina. And maybe you've got a different situation today because in looking at the model that's come out and a lot of the conversations we've had about paying the players and what this is going to look like and that 22 million figure, that's roughly like 22% of income for these major schools. I think the fairest way to do it, and not just the fairest way to do it, the most economically efficient way that's a sustainable model is to say, and again, I'm not an accountant, so it may be not 50%, but 58% or whatever, but basically take half of the money and say, you know what? We value Syracuse and Wake Forest. You are a member of the ACC, a full-fledged member, just like everyone else. So for 50% of this revenue, we split it equally. But for this other 50% of the revenue, we're going to tie it directly to how much money do you make us? Because FSU averages 4.2 million per game and Syracuse, you average 1.1 million per game. And do the math, and you got the accountants, they figure it out and say, that's the split. There you go. And we'll look at it again next year. And it might be changed a little bit, but it'll probably be about the same. And that's what we'll do.
Agreed. And if you get all those presidents in a room and they're going to balk at that, we're going to walk away, we're going to do all this stuff, like you said, the ACC could easily say, bye-bye. Like, you're so lucky to be here. That's like,
yeah, they got nowhere to go. They're not going anywhere.
I don't remember if I mentioned this last week. Hopefully not, because this is another stat I saw. When you want to talk about, you mentioned that 4 million fans number. Between Florida State and Clemson, 31 for Florida State, 28 times it's happened since 2012, I believe was the date. 59 times total. Or 5960. I'm not doing math right now. 59 times total. Okay. The rest of the entire ACC adds up to 50 times. And of those 50 times, I'm sure you can guess probably 48 of them was either against Florida State or Clemson. And then when you add the next closest, and I'll tell you who it is, Notre Dame. Notre Dame is third place behind FSU and Clemson. So how many times do you think Notre Dame did it?
Got 4 million fans?
4 million viewers, yep, since 2012.
Since 2012. Well, I know they got 10 or 11 million playing Ohio State the last 2 years, but I got to think it's pretty high. I do these TV ratings every year. I look at them. I got to think that they've got about probably 3 or 4 games every year. So I'm going to go 3 times. I'm going to go 36.
14.
14.
14. So 14 for Notre Dame, 28 for Clemson, 31 for Florida State. So it is what it is, a microcosm right there. And after Notre Dame, nobody is close. Now, I did not go super, super deep into this. So there is a chance, going off of what you said, you got me thinking, maybe they're talking ACC games, particularly. Maybe they're not talking out of conference games at all. Yeah, maybe it's just ACC. So I would have to go look at that. And they play half the games every year. That would put them right in line with Clemson and Florida State, playing 5 instead of 8. So we'll see on that. But for sure in the ACC, it's Clemson, Florida State, and everybody else.
Yeah, I don't think Notre Dame's only at 14 in 12 seasons. So just to clarify what you're spitting out there, George, if Florida State and Syracuse play, and it's a 4 million viewership game, Syracuse, do they get credit for that, even though they didn't bring in the fans?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah,
that makes sense. That's the only way you can count it. You can't. We know what the deal is. Actually, Syracuse draws fairly well. Actually, nowhere close to Florida State, I'm not saying. But, folks, if you're into TV ratings, I'm telling you, I break these down every offseason. You can go over on the national main channel and just look up TV ratings, and you can find every single breakdown, every conference, and put them all together, and it's there.
Okay, here
all right.
So it was FSU Reddit that posted it. 2023 AC. Okay, no, I'm looking at the wrong one. That was just this year. We can give, like, since I gave the since 2012, just this year, Florida State had 11, Clemson had 6, Louisville had 6, Miami had 5. This one doesn't count Notre Dame. Not sure, man. If I figure that out, I will get back to you. Oh, here it is. Here it is right now. AC school appearances in regular season games with 4+ million television viewers, 2012 through 2023. Source: Sports Media Watch. And Florida State has about 32, like I said. Same thing for Clemson, around 30. And again, Notre Dame is not on that one. So, yeah, wasn't able to confirm that, but definitely confirmed the Florida State and Clemson numbers for sure. So we'll get back on to you guys on that one.
This one is off the beaten path, but I'm going to respond to this comment very briefly. Keith from Spring Hill. Mark, has anyone seen Jason? I believe you're talking about our buddy Jason Parker, who used to be on the show. Since Mike Norvell turned down the Bama job, I remember he wanted CMN to get the Willie treatment. Okay. First of all,
I haven't seen him since then.
For anybody wondering about Jason, Jason's doing fine. He's doing great. And he is certainly welcome to make a guest appearance at any time. So there's nothing wrong there. Jason had other things going on, and he moved on. I just talked to him maybe a month ago. So Jason's doing fine. Yes, Jason and I would get into almost weekly arguments because he believed Willie Taggart was not treated fairly. I didn't dispute that part of it, but I said, if you made a mistake, and not that they didn't make a mistake with Willie Taggart, but I understand they only give him a year and 9 games. Was that what it was? They only gave him 1 season and 9 games. So they pulled the plug rather early, but that doesn't mean you do that with every coach. Every situation's different, number one. Number two, if you make a mistake, or again, I don't think it was a mistake, but if you say, you know what, it really wasn't fair to, we know how it was going down, but it really wasn't fair to not let him complete another season, or maybe even go for a 3rd season if you were going to be fair about it. But that doesn't mean you say, okay, well, we got to do this for everyone. And so Mike Norvell, 9-12 or whatever his record was, 8-13. I think it was actually a game worse than Willie Taggart at the time. Pull the plug. He's done, because that's our standard now, because we did that to Willie Taggart. We got to do that with every. No, you would be a moron. You would not know how to run a business doing that if you just made some hard and fast rule, because guess what happened? If you would have done that, you wouldn't have Mike Norvell right now. And I was arguing that 3 years ago, or whatever the time frame, 4 years ago, with Jason every week, saying, do not let Mike Norvell go. I wasn't predicting this or saying, I know Mike Norvell is going to be a great coach and one of the 5 or 10 best coaches in college football. But I said, I don't know yet. He walked into a situation that was not the Willie Taggart situation, where he took over a Jimbo Fisher roster that was one of the top 10 or 15 rosters in the nation. He took over a Willie Taggart roster that was depleted. And as James has probably better than any of us been able to outline, but I certainly have done my best to say, none of us can realize what it would be like for a first-year head coach. It's one thing if you're Nick Saban and you've got this thing rolling for 15 years and suddenly you've got COVID to deal with. Sure, yeah, that's difficult. But if you're Mike Norvell, you don't even know these guys. You don't know your players. They don't know the terminology. You're trying to institute a new offense and a new defense with new coordinators and build relationships and all that. So that first season, you only played 9 games and the thing was a train wreck for everyone. No, you give him time to show what he can do, and voila, look what has happened.
Yeah, it's really been beautiful. Those people, believe it or not, are still here. Those people are still out here taping for Willie Taggart. They don't do it publicly. They really have to disguise it. They've disguised it more and more and more. Now they just post good stuff about every school but Florida State, and like, oh, why is this recruitment? It's like, I won't say any names, but it's like, it's pretty bad. But yeah, there's no doubt. I guess it was a fair argument back in that time, especially for people who don't know Florida State and from the outset. But you mentioned so many things that were different. You had the COVID shortened season going into the second year. If you go to the third year, boom, you start out on a 4-game winning streak. The rest is history, all of that. But no, there's so many things that go on in a football program besides the W or the L on Saturday, and you can get away with a lot. You can get away with a whole lot with W's. Okay. Now, when you're new, there's a bit of a grace period. And as long as everything looks right, your recruiting is there, the strength and conditioning is there, you see things start to get more organized, you can even go on with L's. You can get 2, 3, even 4 years. You've seen guys get Willie Taggart. He was over on all that stuff. There was not one part of the program where the board of trustees or the president or whatever fan, anybody, boosters was like, hell yes, we can see it. It's going in the right direction. The only thing he did in that, in those tenses is APR. I will say he did a good job of that, of like caring about making people go to class, and he had that on the come up, the APR, which now Mike Norvell just recorded at 997, which is, I don't know if that's a record ever, but it's certainly a record at Florida State, and I've never even heard of one that high. So beautiful things. The 4-year average is at 982, I believe, for us. When Willie Taggart came over, it was like we were looking at bowl bands and stuff like that. It had gotten so low. So yeah, shout out there, but everywhere else, it's been just, it is what it is. I don't want to spend too long on it because at this point, it's just below the 80 and just whatever. I don't know what the motivation is there to hate on Mike Norvell at this point, but it is what it is.
And like you say, it's ancient history at this point, but it's still fun to dig up. And if you love college football, I think it's interesting to look back and say, okay, what did we think in 2020 versus what do we think now? And again, I've told you guys this before, and when we get Chris and James on, and it's a pretty dead, I don't know, beginning of July before we get rolling, I would love, or maybe a special show, would love to dig through the Jimbo Fisher situation, because I think that's fascinating how all that went down, the highs and the lows and the ending and all of that. I would be fascinated to hear that, because I certainly have dug into that, but I don't have the knowledge that you three do concerning Jimbo Fisher and how it ended.
It's fun hearing the stories. We get to get these guys, former players and stuff. I've been lucky to have 4 or 5 people off that national championship team on. So it's a lot of fun getting to hear all the different stories from back in Jimbo's day with Rick Trickett and on to the Christmas tree and him leaving and all that stuff. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, Scott Frost, how many coaches can you look at back in 2018, 2019 that we thought were going to be the future of college football that are just gone? Nick Saban's retired. It's changed quite a bit. But yeah, we're lucky, very lucky with Mike Norvell. And you guys come see me at the Renegade Report right here on YouTube. We'll be live Friday at 7 Eastern. We also do a show Sunday. We do a show Monday called the Renegade Roast that my lovely co-host Jen Santee hosts along with Tiny Hat CEO. And also Tuesdays, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Fridays. Catch us at the Renegade Report. Mark, thanks for having me on as always. We always appreciate you. And yeah, one of these days I'm just gonna like follow you over to the Miami thing and just pick on them one time.
You are welcome, George. It's always a fun time. I had a great time talking college football with you. Absolutely appreciate you being here. And everyone, again, it's the Renegade Report. Get there. All right, George. We'll see you back here next week.
Go Noles, baby.
Miami right now, and then the deep dive on the ACC right here on the FSU channel at 8:30.